welcome back. So, the other day we were looking over that devotion you shared with us, the one from Monday, March 24th, 2025.
Right.
Yeah, Consequences of Greed and Integrity and Faith. Pretty powerful title. And we figured, why not do a deep dive into it today?
Sounds good.
So we're really going to unpack this whole idea, the core of this devotion,
Right.
which, as you know, is based on that story from 2 Kings, chapter 5.
Verses 15 through 27.
Yeah, exactly, 15 through 27.
Yeah.
And we meet some pretty interesting characters in this passage. 2 guys in particular.
Elisha.
Elisha, right, the prophet?
And Gehazi, his servant.
Right, and their choices, especially after this big event that happens, really give us a lot to think about. Human nature, motivations, all that.
For sure.
But first, to set the scene for everyone listening, this all takes place after Naaman, who's a big deal, commander of the Aramean army.
Right.
He's healed. He's miraculously healed from leprosy.
Big miracle.
Huge. And the devotion really highlights how grateful he is, wants to shower Elisha with gifts.
Of course, yeah.
And it makes me think of that question, the one the devotion asks right at the beginning.
Oh, yeah.
I bet a lot of us have felt this. Have you ever had someone, try to repay you for something you did, out of the kindness of your heart, and you felt that hesitation, should you accept it or not?
It's that internal conflict, right?
Yeah.
You don't want to offend them, but it just doesn't feel quite right.
Yeah, exactly. And that's kind of our jumping off point for talking about integrity today. But before we get into all that, let's look at Elisha's reaction to Naaman's generosity.
Okay.
So Naaman's offering all these gifts, and Elisha just straight up says, no.
Yeah, the devotion quotes that key verse where he says, "As surely as the Lord lives, whom I serve, I will not accept a thing."
Wow. Just like that. Those gifts were probably pretty substantial, coming from someone in Naaman's position. Why do you think he was so firm about refusing?
Well, I think the devotion hits the nail on the head when it talks about Elisha's commitment to serving the Lord. It's like his number one priority. He knows that the healing power came from God, not from him personally.
Right.
And to accept payment for that would be like putting a price tag on God's grace.
Yeah, you can't buy miracles.
Exactly. It diminishes the whole thing. It's like he understands he's just a vessel,
So it's about keeping things pure, the motives pure. Elisha's saying, look, God gave this healing freely, and that's how it should stay. It's a beautiful picture of that integrity the devotion talks about, the integrity of true faith.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Yeah.
And what I find so compelling is that this principle, this idea of acting with integrity, goes way beyond just religious figures.
Yeah, totally. The devotion asks, how do we apply it? And gives us these really practical points to think about.
Absolutely. It's not just theoretical. It's for everyday life.
For all of us listening, yeah. And one of the first things it says is to watch out for using, any gifts or special abilities we have, whether it's some talent or maybe a leadership position, for our own gain. It's a good reality check.
Yeah. Are we serving others or ourselves? Are we hoping for something in return, even if it's just a pat on the back?
Right. That's deep. The devotion also talks about practicing generosity without expecting anything back. And that can be tough, I'll be honest.
It's a real challenge sometimes. Human nature, I guess.
Yeah, you catch yourself doing something nice and hoping for, a favor in return without even realizing it.
Subconsciously, right?
Yeah, but the devotion reminds us that everything we have ultimately comes from a higher source. So when we give, it should be a true reflection of that, freely given.
That's the ideal anyway.
Absolutely. And one thing that really struck me was the emphasis on teaching these principles to our kids and those in leadership roles, shaping the culture from the ground up.
Passing it on to the next generation.
Yeah. Okay, so we've got this powerful example of integrity and serving others with Elisha. But now the devotion shifts gears and looks at the dangers of greed. And it does that through Gehazi.
Right, the other main character in this story. And it's a stark contrast.
Yeah, Gehazi sees this whole exchange between Elisha and Naaman. And after Elisha refuses those gifts, I think Gehazi sees dollar signs, a missed opportunity.
Yeah, he lets greed take over.
Big time. The devotion lays out his greedy actions step by step.
It's a downward spiral almost.
First, he runs after Naaman secretly.
Right, behind Elisha's back.
Then he makes up this whole story about Elisha needing silver and clothes for some visiting prophets.
And Naaman, being the generous guy he is, totally buys it.
Of course, he's still overflowing with gratitude from being healed, so he hands over the goods.
And Gehazi takes them and hides them.
So sneaky. But as the devotion points out, you can't hide your true intentions forever. especially not from someone like Elisha.
He's a prophet after all. He's got spiritual insight.
And the consequence for Gehazi's deception and greed.
Well, it's pretty dramatic. Elisha confronts him, and Gehazi is struck with Naaman's leprosy.
Whoa, talk about a wake-up call. It's a pretty sobering reminder of how destructive greed can be, and the devotion highlights this as a warning.
Yeah, a big one. It shows that even being close to someone like Elisha, someone with such strong morals, doesn't make you immune to greed's influence.
And that one selfish desire led to a whole chain of negative actions.
The lie, the betrayal, the abuse of his position.
Like a domino effect. And the devotion emphasizes the spiritual consequences, too. It says that greed can blind us and lead us away from what God wants for us.
Makes you lose sight of the bigger picture.
Definitely. So how do we protect ourselves from falling into that same trap?
Well, thankfully, the devotion gives us some practical advice for that, too.
Okay, lay it on us.
It starts with cultivating contentment, learning to be grateful for what we already have instead of always wanting more.
Easier said than done in our culture, right? We're bombarded with messages telling us to buy this, upgrade that, get the newest thing.
Absolutely. It takes conscious effort to resist that.
It's like a daily battle, but so worth it. The next point the devotion makes is about being honest and transparent, especially if we're in any leadership role.
Yeah, Gehazi's downfall started with that lie, fueled by his greed. Transparency builds trust and helps keep us accountable.
Makes sense. And the last thing the devotion suggests is putting accountability structures in place, like in our faith communities, families, even at work.
It's recognizing that we're not superhuman. We need support to resist temptation.
Yeah, it's like having guardrails to keep us on track. So to recap, we have Elisha, the model of integrity, serving God and others selflessly. And then there's Gehazi, consumed by greed and facing serious consequences.
Two paths, two very different outcomes.
And the devotion sums it up perfectly with its one word. Serve with integrity, shun greed.
Simple but powerful.
Totally. So as we wrap up this deep dive, here's a final thought for everyone to chew on. Think about that principle we talked about earlier, the idea that God's grace is not for sale. How might that idea change the way you interact with people and the reasons behind your actions, both personally and professionally?
That's a great question to reflect on. It really challenges us to examine our hearts and make sure we're living with integrity.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the consequences of greed and integrity in faith, all inspired by that thought-provoking devotion on 2 Kings. We hope you'll keep thinking about these principles and how they apply to your own journey.